Hi, I'm Natalie, and welcome to the final episode of Rhetoric 101. Today's episode is all about bringing everything together. Up until this point, we focused on understanding rhetoric, what it is, how it works, and the key concepts behind it. But now we're going to shift more into the application, about how you actually use rhetoric. So let's start with a quick recap of what we've covered thus far. In episode 1, we defined rhetoric as the art of persuasion. More importantly, we framed it as a tool for managing disagreement, not just winning arguments. We also introduced the difference between arguing and fighting, emphasizing that productive disagreement is the goal, rather than just to score against another person. In episode 2, we focused on ethos, which is credibility and character. We broke that down into 3 parts. First, virtue or shared values. Second, practical wisdom or experience and judgment. And finally, disinterest, meaning your fairness and a lack of self-interest. Next, in episode 3, we explored pathos, the emotional appeal. We talked about how emotions drive action and why understanding your audience's emotional state is critical to persuasion. And then finally, in the 4th episode, we covered logos, which is logical reasoning and argument structure. We discussed the importance of evidence, clear organization, and recognizing logical fallacies. And throughout all of this, one key idea stands out. Ethos, pathos, and logos work best together. Now, we're going to shift from theory to strategy. A central idea from Heinrichs is that rhetoric isn't just something you study. It's something you do. It's active and it's practical. To understand how it works in real life, we can think of rhetoric in 2 ways. First, as rhetorical offense, and second, as rhetorical defense. Offense is how we persuade others, and defense is how we evaluate and resist persuasion. So let's first talk a little bit about offense, which is how we use rhetoric to influence others. Using ethos on the offense means establishing credibility early. You want your audience to trust you from the start. This can mean highlighting shared values or showing that you understand their perspective. You want to feel relatable and trustworthy to the audience in order for your persuasion to be effective. So next is using pathos on the offense, which involves appealing to the right emotions. This doesn't really mean being overly dramatic, it just means to align your tone with what the audience feels or needs to feel in that moment. Whether it be urgency, excitement, or reassurance, emotion helps people act. Now, with that being said, you do want to make sure that you are very careful about what emotion you are selecting to push forward, because one slight change in tone can have a very big outcome depending on how it's put. And then finally, using logos on the offense means to build clear, structured arguments. You support your points with evidence, examples, and reasoning that is easy to follow. While you're doing all of this, you want to make sure that you are incorporating all 3 at the same time, because like previously said, if you start going on about statistics and facts, it's going to mean nothing if you're not credible or if you're not using any emotion to drive the audience to actually do something. And then going a little bit beyond these 3 appeals, 2 things also matter: timing and audience awareness. Even a strong argument can fail if it's delivered at the wrong moment or to the wrong audience. Good persuasion requires adapting to the situation. Think about something simple, like convincing a professor to reconsider a grade. To do so, you're going to want to make sure that you've seemed credible throughout the entirety of the year and in this position. Maybe bring forth past efforts that you've put forward, or maybe even times that you visited their office hours. These are all going to be helpful in establishing your credibility, as long as you go about stating them correctly. Then you're going to want a logical explanation. Why did you mess up on certain parts? Maybe why did you turn in the assignment late? Give some facts to support your claim. And then finally, you want to also make sure that you're using the right tone. You don't want to sound like you're accusing them, and you don't want to sound too defensive either. You're going to want to speak in a tone that appeals to the situation emotionally. Or another example could be persuading a sibling to change the TV channel. You're still going to want to use the same ideas from ethos, pathos, and logos, just maybe in a more casual way than you would have with a professor. Now, let's talk about defense a little. How should we protect ourselves from being persuaded poorly or unethically? First, you always want to question ethos. Ask questions like, is this person credible? Are they trustworthy? Or do they have a clear bias? Then second, you're going to want to analyze their pathos. What emotions are being triggered? Are they appropriate? Are they being used to manipulate? Or maybe even, why do I feel this way? Third, you're going to want to evaluate their logos. Does this argument actually make sense? Are there logical fallacies present? And don't let the word logical fallacies scare you, because they're actually a lot more common than you would think. Even if you go about normal conversations, not just arguments, and if you try to listen to them, you're probably going to hear them, even coming from maybe parents, siblings, or friends. There are also some other common signs of manipulation that you're going to want to watch for. This includes the overuse of fear or urgency, or misleading or cherry-pick statistics, or maybe even false dilemmas that limit your choices. This all connects back to Heinrichs' idea that being a good rhetoric means being both a skilled persuader and a critical audience member. As we previously stated, it's not only the responsibility of the persuader to think about how they're persuading, but it's also the responsibility of the audience member to be able to point out when things don't seem ethically or morally correct. And with that being said, throughout our everyday lives, we're constantly switching between being on the offense and on the defense. When you watch advertisements, you're being persuaded. So you can also analyze the techniques that are being used. In that sense, you would be on the defense. Or maybe if you engage in political discussions, you might argue your perspective while also evaluating others' claims. You're more than likely going to be switching in between the offense and the defense. Even in conversations with family or friends, you're going to be moving back and forth between persuading and being persuaded. The more aware you are of rhetoric, the more intentional your communication becomes. So, why does all of this matter? Well, rhetoric helps us to communicate more effectively. It helps you avoid being easily manipulated, and it allows you to engage in healthier, more productive arguments instead of unproductive fights. These skills apply everywhere, from academics to careers or even personal relationships. Understanding rhetoric doesn't just make you a better speaker, it makes you a more thoughtful communicator overall and a critical listener. Now, that's going to bring us to the end of this series. Thanks for tuning in for these past few episodes, and I hope you learned something.